My beloved child, listen carefully, because something your soulmate quietly set in motion has taken a turn they never expected. For a long time, there has been one question about you they could never completely answer. It was not because you had done something wrong. It was because there was a part of your story that never seemed to match what other people assumed about you. Certain details remained unexplained. Certain moments from your past seemed to carry a meaning nobody could identify. And every time your soulmate tried to understand you through ordinary conversation, they felt as though they were standing outside a locked room with no key. Eventually, curiosity became too powerful to ignore. They wanted clarity, not another rumor. They wanted facts, not somebody else's interpretation. So without telling you, your soulmate hired a private investigator to quietly look into the mystery surrounding your past. They believed the investigator would return with one simple explanation and finally settle everything. But that is not what happened. The first message they received contained only a few words: "There is something unusual here." Your soulmate stared at that sentence longer than they expected. Unusual? What could possibly be unusual? They immediately asked for an explanation, but the investigator refused to jump to conclusions. More time was needed. More pieces had to be connected. Then something happened that changed the entire direction of the search. The investigator discovered that one detail everyone had treated as insignificant was actually connected to several important moments in your life. And suddenly, your soulmate realized this investigation was no longer about uncovering something embarrassing about you. It was about discovering why you had become the person standing before them today. Stay a little longer, because the detail that came next made your soulmate question almost everything they had previously been told about you. What the investigator uncovered first was not a dramatic secret but a pattern, and somehow that made it even more powerful. Different people who had known you during completely separate periods of your life described something surprisingly similar. Whenever circumstances changed unexpectedly, whenever plans disappeared, whenever people misunderstood you, you somehow continued moving forward without explaining everything you were carrying inside. Your soulmate had always noticed that quiet strength in you, but they never understood where it came from. Now the investigator was beginning to find the missing pieces. There had apparently been a turning point in your past, a moment when you could have chosen one direction but quietly chose another. Nobody around you seemed to understand how important that decision had been. Yet almost everything that followed could be traced back to it. Your soulmate leaned closer to the investigator's report because one question immediately appeared in their mind: why did they never tell me this? But before they could settle on an answer, another discovery arrived. Someone from your past had apparently remembered you very differently from the way others described you. This person did not speak about you as someone hiding something questionable. They spoke about you as someone who had protected something deeply personal from becoming public conversation. That distinction changed everything. Your soulmate had hired an investigator believing there might be a secret standing between the two of you. Instead, they were beginning to wonder whether your silence had actually protected something meaningful. And then came the sentence that made them stop reading: "I found the person who knows why the story was never fully told." That was the moment curiosity became something deeper. Your soulmate suddenly needed to know who this person was, what they remembered, and why their name had never surfaced before. But the investigator had another surprise waiting. Hours later, a private conversation took place, and your soulmate was finally told about the person the investigator had located. This individual had known about one important chapter of your life for a long time, yet had apparently chosen not to interfere. They remembered something you once did when nobody was watching closely, something small enough that most people would have forgotten it but meaningful enough that this person never did. You had apparently been given an opportunity to make a decision entirely for yourself, but instead you considered how that choice would affect somebody else. You never announced it. You never demanded recognition. You simply made the choice and moved forward. That revelation hit your soulmate harder than any scandalous discovery could have. Suddenly, little things about you began making sense: why you sometimes think before answering emotional questions, why you notice details other people overlook, why you can care deeply without immediately explaining you. The investigator had been hired to expose a secret, yet every new piece was revealing character instead. But don't skip this moment, because this was not the final discovery. The investigator then explained that there was still one unexplained gap in the timeline. A period existed where almost nobody could clearly describe what had happened around you, and one name appeared repeatedly near that missing chapter. Your soulmate recognized the name. That was the shock. They had heard it before. Not from you, but during an entirely different conversation months earlier. At the time, the name meant nothing. Now it seemed to be sitting directly in the center of the mystery. Your soulmate immediately asked, "What does this person know?" The investigator paused before answering. What came next was something neither of them had predicted. The investigator explained that this person had not been hiding information about something you had done. They had been holding on to information about something that had been done for you. Years earlier, when your path could have moved in a completely different direction, somebody quietly helped create an opportunity that eventually changed what became possible for you. You may not even have understood the full significance of it at the time. Perhaps you thought a door simply opened. Perhaps you believed circumstances unexpectedly shifted in your favor. But according to what the investigator had pieced together, there had been another person behind part of that turning point, someone who believed in your potential before your future had become visible. Your soulmate went completely quiet. The investigation they started because they feared there was something they did not know about you was now revealing a hidden chain of kindness, choices, timing, and unexpected connections. And there was one more detail: the person who helped you had apparently asked for no recognition. They did not want their involvement turned into a story. They simply wanted you to have a chance. Imagine what your soulmate felt hearing that. Everything suddenly looked different. Your independence looked different. Your guarded moments looked different. Even your habit of appreciating small gestures suddenly carried another layer of meaning. But one question remained unanswered: did you know who had helped you? The investigator could not confirm it yet. And that uncertainty created the biggest mystery of all. Because if you knew, then perhaps you had deliberately kept this chapter private. But if you did not know, then someone had been carrying a truth about your own life that even you had never fully discovered. Your soulmate now wanted the answer more than ever, but what happened next completely changed the reason they wanted it. By the end of that conversation, your soulmate no longer cared about catching you hiding something. That entire idea had disappeared. They began feeling something far more emotional. they wanted to understand the version of you that existed before they entered your story. They wanted to understand the choices that shaped your heart, the quiet disappointments you overcame, the unexpected kindness you received, and the reasons you learned to keep certain feelings protected until trust felt real. And then the investigator sent one final update for the evening. A previously overlooked connection had surfaced between the person who helped you and someone your soulmate already knew. That single connection meant the two separate worlds they thought existed, your past and their present, might have crossed long before either of you realized it. Your soulmate read the message twice. Then 3 times. Something huge was waiting inside that connection, but they did not yet have enough information to understand it. For the first time since hiring the investigator, they stopped asking, "What is your secret?" and started asking a completely different question: how much of this story does even my soulmate know? And that question changed everything. Because the investigator believes the next conversation could finally reveal why that hidden person stepped into your path, why nobody explained it afterward, and why your soulmate somehow became connected to the same story much later. The investigation began with suspicion, but it is moving toward a revelation your soulmate never prepared for. And when the final missing piece surfaces, they may discover that the greatest secret surrounding you was never something dark hiding behind your past. It may be the extraordinary reason two separate paths kept moving closer together without either person realizing who had quietly connected the first thread. Something changed the very next morning. Your soulmate expected another ordinary update from the investigator, perhaps another name, another forgotten conversation, another tiny clue that would take days to understand. Instead, one message arrived that made everything suddenly feel connected: "I finally understand why that person helped them." Your soulmate immediately wanted the full explanation, but the investigator warned that the answer was stranger and far more emotional than the original mystery. The person who quietly created that opportunity for you had apparently noticed something about you long before anyone considered you extraordinary. They had watched how you responded when nobody was praising you, how you treated people who could offer you nothing, and how you kept moving even when your plans did not unfold the way you hoped. One particular moment had stayed in their memory for years. It was a moment you probably considered completely ordinary. You had stepped aside so somebody else could have an opportunity first. There was no audience. No applause. No expectation of receiving anything back. Yet someone noticed. And according to the investigator, that simple decision started a chain of events you never saw. Your soulmate suddenly understood something breathtaking: perhaps the secret surrounding you was not one hidden event. Perhaps it was a series of quiet choices that had slowly built the road beneath your feet. But then the investigator revealed something even more surprising. The person who helped you had spoken about you to someone else. That second person had remembered your name. Years passed, circumstances changed, people moved in different directions, but your name remained in that person's memory. And somehow, much later, that same person became connected to someone in your soulmate's world. Your soulmate could barely believe the coincidence. How could two completely separate chapters overlap like this? The investigator had one answer: "I don't think we've reached the beginning of the connection yet." Don't skip now, because the next discovery pushed the investigation into territory nobody had expected. The investigator returned to the earliest information available and noticed something everyone else had missed. Before your soulmate ever knew you, before certain people entered your life, there had been a conversation about you. Not gossip. Not criticism. A conversation about your potential. Someone had apparently said that you were going to become important to another person's journey someday, although nobody knew exactly how. At the time, the comment seemed almost meaningless. Life continued. The people involved forgot about it. But now the investigator had found a person who remembered hearing those words. Your soulmate felt a strange emotion reading the account because it sounded almost impossible that your name had traveled through conversations long before your relationship reached its current chapter. They asked the investigator whether this could simply be mistaken memory. The investigator agreed that memories can be imperfect, which was why they had checked the details against other information. And that was where another surprise appeared. Two separate people remembered the same gathering. Both remembered you being mentioned. Neither understood why it mattered at the time. Your soulmates suddenly started replaying the first time they heard about you. Was that really the beginning? Or had your stories been moving toward the same intersection much earlier? Stay till the end, because this is where the investigation stopped being about your past and began revealing something about your soulmate. The investigator found an old connection involving someone your soulmate trusted. That person had apparently heard something positive about you before your soulmate ever asked them about you. Yet they had never mentioned it. Why? When your soulmate discovered this, they immediately wanted answers. They had hired an investigator to understand what you were keeping private, but now it appeared that somebody on their side of the story had been quietly holding an unexplained detail. That conversation finally happened, and the answer was nothing like your soulmate expected. The person admitted they had heard about you before, but they had deliberately avoided influencing your soulmate's feelings. They believed that if the connection between you was genuine, your soulmate needed to discover your character naturally rather than through somebody else's glowing description. So they remained silent. Your soulmate was stunned. Think about what that meant. There had been people around both sides of this story who knew little pieces, yet nobody possessed the entire picture. One person knew about an opportunity from your past. Another remembered a conversation about your potential. Someone close to your soulmate had heard your name before. And you were standing in the middle without necessarily knowing how many invisible threads existed around your story. The investigator then asked a question that changed the atmosphere completely. What exactly did you expect me to find when you hired me? Your soulmate had no immediate answer. Perhaps they had expected a hidden relationship, an unexplained decision, or some dramatic reason for your privacy. Instead, every discovery was forcing them to examine their own assumptions. Maybe mystery did not always mean something negative was being concealed. Sometimes mystery simply meant there were chapters another person had not yet earned the right to hear. That realization affected your soulmate deeply. They began remembering moments when you almost opened up but changed the subject. Moments when your expression suggested there was more behind your words. Previously, they interpreted those moments as distance. Now they wondered whether you were waiting for something much simpler, trust. And then came another update. The investigator had finally located the original person connected to that forgotten opportunity. They were willing to explain everything. But there was one condition: they wanted your soulmate to understand something before hearing the story. The investigator repeated their words exactly. Don't judge the person you know today until you understand what they chose back then. Those words stayed in your soulmate's mind throughout the entire conversation that followed. The person explained that years earlier you had faced a decision nobody around you fully understood. One option looked easier. Another demanded patience and uncertainty. People may have expected you to choose what seemed immediately comfortable, yet you chose according to something deeper. You were thinking about the person you wanted to become, not merely the situation you wanted to escape. That choice impressed someone watching from a distance. They did not step into your life dramatically. They simply opened one small door. What happened afterward depended entirely on you. And you walked through it. That was the part your soulmate had never known. The investigator's original mission had been to discover your secret, but the real discovery was becoming your unseen history of decisions. Every choice had created another possibility. Every possibility had introduced another person. Every person had carried one fragment of the story forward. And eventually, one of those fragments reached the world your soulmate lived in. But wait, because the person explaining everything then mentioned one detail the investigator had not discovered. You had apparently returned a kindness years later without realizing who originally helped you. You helped someone connected to the same circle, never knowing there was any connection. Your soulmate went silent again. The story had somehow completed a loop. Someone quietly gave you an opportunity. Years later, you unknowingly became an opportunity for somebody else. Nobody planned it. Nobody announced it. And yet the circle closed. Your soulmate finally understood why the investigator kept saying the story was unusual. It was not because your secret was shocking in the way they originally imagined. It was because dozens of ordinary decisions had created an extraordinary pattern. Still, one final mystery remained. The investigator had found evidence that you once asked a question about your soulmate long before your soulmate believed you were seriously paying attention to them. And this was the revelation your soulmate was completely unprepared to hear. According to the investigator, there had been an earlier moment when you quietly became curious about your soulmate too. You did not announce it. You did not turn it into a dramatic confession. You simply asked someone one careful question about them, and then continued with your life. Your soulmate wanted to know exactly what you had asked, but the investigator had only received part of the conversation. The person remembering it could recall your expression and the subject, but not every word. What they did remember was enough to change everything. You had wanted to know what kind of person your soulmate was when nobody needed anything from them. Not what they owned. Not how impressive they appeared. Not what other people thought. You wanted to know their character. Your soulmate felt the entire investigation turn back toward them. They had spent all this time searching for your hidden truth, while years of clues suggested you had once been quietly trying to understand theirs. Suddenly, the investigator's next discovery mattered more than every previous one. Somewhere inside that old conversation was the reason you first noticed your soulmate. And according to the newest information, another person remembers exactly what happened immediately afterward. Your soulmate has not heard that account yet.